Paradise Season 2. One of the biggest questions at the heart of Paradise Season 2 revolves around the very existence of Project Alex, what it truly is, what it's capable of, and more importantly, why it even exists in the first place. Because as the story continues to unfold, it's becoming increasingly clear that Alex is not just a background element or a simple scientific experiment, but instead it sits right at the center of everything that's happening, connecting the past, present, and potentially even the future in ways that completely reshape how we understand the story. This video will contain spoilers, and in the most recent episode, we witnessed one of the most shocking and important moments in the entire series so far, where we saw Project Alex fully in motion, with a man named Don receiving a message back in 1997 from something identified as Alex Q. And that message was incredibly specific, incredibly chilling, and deeply significant, because it was focused on Don needing to deliver a warning about a baby that would be born at exactly 12:01 on June 6th.
Statement that she could be stopped at the right time, which immediately raises massive questions about how the sender knew this information, what the intention behind the message was, and how this ties into the wider narrative, because this isn't just a random warning. This is a calculated attempt to influence the timeline itself. And when you really start to think about it, it opens up a whole new layer of storytelling that suggests that the events we are watching may not be fixed, but instead are being manipulated from somewhere else. And that is where Project Alex becomes the key to everything, because based on what we've seen so far, there are multiple theories about what Alex actually is, and each one carries huge implications for the direction of the show. But the theory that seems to have the strongest foundation is the idea that Alex is not a person at all, but instead a project, something that was originally developed by Henry Miller and potentially taken or repurposed by Sinatra. And when we look at Henry Miller's background, we learn that he had a wife named Alex who was suffering from Huntington's disease, which explains the emotional origin behind the project's name. But it also adds a deeply personal layer to the entire concept, because if Henry was developing something like this, it wasn't just for power or control. It was driven by loss, by desperation, and by the desire to change something that felt impossible.
Because maybe he knew his fate, but also knew that it was unavoidable, and that adds a tragic dimension to his character, because it means he lived his final days with complete awareness of what was coming, and yet was powerless to stop it. And when we take that idea further, it also explains his lifestyle choices, the way he talked about enjoying life with Alex, traveling, making memories, living fully before her condition worsened. Because if he had seen the future, if he had seen her suffering, then it would make sense that he would choose to live differently, to appreciate every moment, and to create as many memories as possible before it was too late. And this same logic can be applied to Sinatra, because if she now has access to Project Alex, then her motivations become much clearer, especially when we consider the loss of her son, Dylan, which is arguably the most defining trauma in her life. And if she believes that she can send a message back in time to prevent his illness from progressing, to get him treated earlier, or even to completely avoid his death, then everything she's doing suddenly takes on a different meaning, because it's no longer just about control or survival.
Rewriting her own past. And that's where things become incredibly dangerous. Because once you introduce the ability to alter the past, the ethical boundaries completely collapse, and decisions become driven by personal desire rather than collective good. And this ties directly into the message that was sent to Dawn in 1997, because that message wasn't just about Jane, it was about preventing a future outcome, specifically the deaths that would be caused by her actions. And if we interpret that message correctly, it was essentially suggesting that Jane should be stopped or even killed before she becomes who she is destined to become, which is an incredibly dark and morally complex idea, because it raises the question of whether it is justifiable to eliminate someone before they commit any wrongdoing, simply because of what they might do in the future. And this is where the show really leans into its deeper themes, exploring the balance between fate and free will. Because if Jane's path is already known, does she even have a choice? Or is she simply following a predetermined trajectory? And if that trajectory can be altered, who gets to decide how and when? And this is why the theory that Jane could eventually kill Hadley becomes even more significant, because it creates a direct link between the message and Sinatra's personal motivations, since losing a child is something she has already experienced, and the idea of reliving that pain would be unbearable. So if she knew that it was going to happen, if she saw it coming, then it would make perfect sense for her to try to stop it at any cost, even if that means manipulating events across time. And this also reinforces the idea that the bunker itself is not a permanent solution, because throughout the series we've seen hints that life inside it is not sustainable in the long term, and that it was always meant to be a temporary measure, a way to survive the immediate aftermath of the disaster, but not a true path forward. And if Sinatra has realized that, then it would explain why she is focusing on Project Alex, because instead of trying to fix the future, she's trying to change the past, to go back far enough that the disaster never happens in the first place. And this aligns perfectly with the recurring statements from the scientist, who has repeatedly said that the damage done to the planet is irreversible, that humanity has gone too far, and that nothing can be done to undo it. And that perspective is incredibly important because it sets the stage for the ultimate conflict, which is not just about survival, but about whether the timeline itself can be rewritten, and if it can, what the consequences of that would be, because changing the past doesn't just fix problems, it creates new ones. It alters
relationships, it erases events, and it erases the possibility that entire lives could be undone. And this is why Project Alex is so compelling as a concept, because it introduces stakes that go beyond individual characters, beyond individual events, and into the very fabric of reality within the show. And as we move forward, it's likely that we will see more examples of its use, more messages being sent, more attempts to influence outcomes, and potentially even more paradoxes being created. And all of this will build towards a larger revelation about what Alex truly is, who is controlling it, and what the ultimate goal is, and whether that goal is even achievable. Because as we've already seen, knowing the future doesn't necessarily mean you can change it, and trying to do so may only ensure that it happens exactly as it was always meant to. And that is what makes Paradise such a gripping and thought-provoking series, because it takes a concept like time manipulation and uses it not just as a plot device, but as a way to explore deeper questions about destiny, choice, loss, and the lengths people will go to in order to protect the ones they love. And as we continue to watch these events unfold, one thing is certain: Project Alex is not just a mystery to be solved, it is the key to everything. And whatever the truth behind it turns out to be, it is going to change the story in ways that we are only just beginning to understand.